Hello, lads. I am Simon. This is my review of the 917, made by TreeLeaf69. This video was supposed to go out about a couple weeks ago, but I've been very sick, so I apologize for the delay. I also apologize for the huge mess. That has nothing to do with me being sick. So anyway, if you're not familiar with the myth, the man, the legend, our hero, TreeLeaf64, the greatest of tree leaves, this is a board that he, I guess, oversaw, not necessarily designed. This was designed by an actual designer, which is fantastic because it came out really good. The unit I have here is in a Gulf oil livery, which apparently is the only color, which is pretty cool. The board is very, very heavily inspired by a particular car. You can probably figure out which one it is. It's got a 9.17 degree typing angle, following the theme, very cool. It's decently hefty, at about 1.9 kilos unbuilt, which is great for an FRL. Again, obviously, it's very bezel-y. It's a big bezel-y boy. It's very curvy. It's got a lot going on, so there is a lot of material in there. It's a relatively simple, though somewhat stiff top mount. And it's pricey. It's about $590 at about 20 MOQ. And at 20 MOQ, I consider that fair. I consider the layout support good. You're kind of locked to a Sangan bottom row, but you can split your right shift, etc., backspace, all that good stuff. And yeah, overall, it's pretty good. Overall, it is pretty good. Now, this review is going to be shorter than my usual reviews. I'm going to make an effort to kind of streamline this a little bit. Not because it's like a bad board or a boring board. It's because most of what's going on with this is aesthetics. And if you're interested in this board, you're going to buy it because you like the way that it looks. Now, when you do something like that, you obviously want to know, hey, does it feel good? Does it sound good? To which, yes and yes, as long as you're okay with a firm typing experience. Not like finger-hurtingly firm, but firm. I'm not too much of a firm enjoyer, but I do like the board. It is a pleasure to use. So let's roll the intro and do review. TreeLeaf69 917. All right, obviously very bezel-y and whatnot, but first let's talk about the unboxing experience. Another thing that I'm going to apologize for is I've tried really, really hard to get the lighting for this to work well, but it has not. The top is basically a silver blue, kind of like blue-gray, but imagine blue-silver top, and a very, very nice orange bottom. Now, on camera, it looks kind of yellow to orange, but it is very orange. This over here is the most accurate representation of the color. Obviously, the light is coming from over there. But yeah. So in terms of unboxing experience, consider this a lesson. The best way to package a board historically is the way that TGR does it, which is there will be a piece of foam around the board, and the board itself is in a transparent, basically just like big Ziploc bag. This means that if it's being shipped internationally or being checked or inspected, somebody can just open it up, see, okay, it's a keyboard, and close it. In this case, another alternative is you can put the keyboard in a hard case, so whoever's inspecting it will open the case, see it's a keyboard, and leave it alone. I have struggled from two different boards that this has happened to, where the board is heavily bubble wrapped and it's not very clear what is specifically inside it. So the customs official, not knowing that there's, something super fragile in there, will go and smack it with their knife super hard, which is kind of what happened to this one. Now there's a mark here that basically continues across the plate. Let me find my switch opener real quick, and I can show you the damage. So hopefully this can serve as a little bit of education for how we package our boards and how we ship our boards. Now, apparently my unit is the only unit that this happened to, but still, you got to be careful. It's mostly just so you at home learn the best way to possibly ship a keyboard. So apologies for the coughing. I was super sick starting about 2 weeks ago, and I'm still recovering. So I might just randomly cough all over the place. I'll do my best in editing to like drop the volume and whatnot, but you'll have to excuse me. Alrighty, let me show you what's going on the macro cam. Okie dokie. So right here, this is a super, super deep scratch for the record. Like I can get a decent amount of my nail in there. And the scratch went all the way across the plate up until like about right here. And you can see that. Kind of looks like there's a hair there. That's just a super, super deep cut from a knife. So there's your lesson. Okay, for some reason I cannot disable this. That's kind of sus. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm gonna have to do this manually. I apologize. You may have noticed that the room looks a little bit different. I had to shift my desk here because I'm gonna put another desk in this room. So I've kind of just like shoved everything in this corner and reset up my stream setup. So like the colors are a little bit off, the lighting is a little bit off, but it is what it is. When I'm fully recovered, I'll take care of it. We'll make sure that the colors are on point. Okay, so as I said earlier, if you're buying this board, you're buying it because you like the design. And to be fair, the design is there. I personally love the FRL layout. It is a very comfortable layout for me. My logic for FRL over TKL is I don't really use dedicated F keys, but I do use dedicated nav. And when I'm sitting at work, for example, I'll put my phone here just so it's convenient. So like I look at the keyboard when I type because I have terrible, terrible hands and my proprioception is pretty much non-existent. So I have to physically see where my hands are to be able to type, especially on my left hand. So I'm looking down and I always have my phone here. So if there's a notification and it's on silent, I see it. It's convenient. And you can fit 2 phones. So I do enjoy FRL. I am generally an enjoyer of thinner bezels. You guys know me. I love my Korean proportions, which is like 4 to 5 millimeter sides, 8 millimeter tops. This top is about 11-ish millimeters, and this looks to be about 11-ish millimeters, but then continues further forward as it goes down. So it is decently bezel-y. It is decently bezel-y. But there's a lot going on curvature-wise. Again, if we consider the price point of $590 at 20 MOQ, if this was like a super, super basic design, I wouldn't consider that a fair price, but considering all the things this is actually doing, it's pretty good. Now, I haven't mentioned it, and we'll go more in depth once we get into the inside. There is an internal and an external steel weight. Now, the external steel weight is very small, but still, there is quite a lot of complexity. So let's do a little tour with our macro cam. Try and get a little distance. All right, so first things first. Let me see if I can make this tiny bit brighter for you guys. Let's see. There you go. All right, first thing we see here is the sides don't go straight down. There's this tiny, tiny little curvature on the ledge right there. And it's very, very subtle. You notice it when you handle the board, but visually looking top down, you don't really notice it. If anything, from a distance, it kind of looks like an anodization stripe or a discoloration, but that actually pops out. So let's get closer so you can check that out. See that? It's the slightest little curve, and it's very, very subtle. And all it does is it makes the top, at the very top, a little bit thinner than the bottom. And this little bump here that you see on camera allows the top to match up to the bottom, because this is a seamed case. Now it's a 2-color seamed case, so you don't have to worry about anodization matching, but it's pretty dope. The front is here. All the corners are very, very soft, and the front lip basically, instead of going straight down, comes a little bit forward. Apologies again. Now that goes all the way across the board until we get to the back. Now the back, let me see if I can get a good angle on this. All right, I'll just do top down. I prefer the macro cam because the colors are a little bit more accurate on it because it doesn't have to deal with as much light. All right, but from here we can see the side profile. We've got the little bump here. It's a lot more apparent in this lighting. You've got a very subtle curve here. All this is curved. There are no hard edges pretty much anywhere. There's a tiny little bit of a hard edge here where the bottom goes in like this and then like that. You can see it right there. That is pretty much the only hard edge on this entire board. But you've got this little soft thing, and then you've got this as well. This basically means that the forehead up here basically has nothing under it. So you're not locked into a situation in which adding a forehead will add a lot of internal cavity space, therefore making it sound a little bit hollow. This does not suffer from this. If anything, just picking this up, it feels very, very dense. So yeah, that curve goes all the way up and finally meets at what we would consider the bottom. Bottom is fairly simple. These look like 9mm bump-ons, if I'm not mistaken. I should know this because it didn't come with bump-ons and I had to get some after the fact, but I assume they're 9mm. They might be 8mm. There we go. Very nice. USB port cutout is okay. Generally, I prefer it to be flush, and right here it is flush, but up here you do have a little contact point, and if you are dealing with very thick boys like mine, it can be a little rough. Specifically, if I were to show you the port right here, all right, come on, buddy. You can see the anodization has started to strip off right there where my big old connector gets in the way. Again, not everybody is using stupid large connectors like I am, but hey, it is something to keep in mind. So like if you appreciate the anodization on this keyboard, which you absolutely should, be a little bit more careful. Use a smaller USB connector head, or potentially one that's not made out of metal with knurling on the sides that's like CNC machined. Preferably don't do that. All right, let's get in there. Let's check it out. The anodization, for the record, is top notch. This comes from the same anodizing place as many other high-end keyboards. Basically anything by Max, anything by Heine, most things by TGR, etc., etc. So anodization is spot on, but just because it comes from a good manufacturer doesn't necessarily mean that the quality control will be good. But on this, quality control looks fantastic, and with a unit size of 20, even though it's somebody inexperienced running the group by, 20 is manageable. So, I mean, TLDR, if you like the board, go for it. You'll very likely actually get the board because, again, small MOQ. So here we have an engraving. It says thicc. I have no idea what that's about. There is a wheel here that is screwed in via a M2, looks like M2 hex. That ties the external weight into the internal weight. It looks pretty cool. One thing to keep in mind is this external weight does protrude further up than the bottom of the board. So when this originally came without defeat, this was basically a pivot point, and I could just pivot, like when the board was right side up, I could just turn the board around because the wheel came out a little bit further than everything else. So that is something to keep in mind. You will need defeat. If you put it on a desk mat, though, the desk mat will kind of just eat the wheel and the feet, and realistically, it allows you to have a relatively good front height. Like, this is very front end bezel-y, but the front height is about, I think, 21.9-ish or 21.8-ish. So under 22, even though it seems like a lot more, without the feet, which on a desk mat, you're not going to notice the feet because with the weight of the board is going to dig into the desk mat. So it's basically going to be flush. I have to force my nail in there for it to get in there. So yeah, this is infilled. To be honest with you, I'm not sure if all the units are infilled or if they're not. The ones that I've seen have been. Maybe there's an option to not get infill. I apologize for not having this information, but if you're interested enough in this particular board, you're going to go check out the IC. I'll link it in the description because, again, this is a board you buy because you love the theme and you love the design. So yeah, basically that's the externals. Just one more engraving here, which looks like some sort of off indicator. I assume that's also inspired by car stuff. I'm not a big Porsche man, so I just know they make good cars. So yeah, that's the other engraving right there. So yeah, I have it built with bone stock Gat X, and for the record, it sounds great for bone stock Gat X. This is a build that I did not put much effort into. I just wanted to just check out the board real quick, not necessarily like see how good my particular build is. I'm not going to get to keep this unless I want to spend $590, which honestly I'd love to do just to have it as a showpiece, even though the typing feel is not necessarily for me, but yeah. So yeah, this is a relatively low effort build. We'll get into the sound test after we go through the internals, and you guys will see that it does sound good, but you'll hear some ticking from stabs and like the switches aren't lubed, but it's still really enjoyable to use. It's actually a really enjoyable board. So let me open it up off camera, and we'll go through the internals. All right, we've got the screws out. There are a total of 7 case screws, 3 on the bottom, 4 on the top. Well, 3 on the front, 4 on the back to be specific. I think this is an M3. This is a 2.5. These are super nice screws, and we will check out these screws. These are obviously not factory screws. These are aftermarket screws that come with the board. You can tell that they're good screws. So let's do our usual screw review. I keep trying to go for my Stream Deck. All right. Let's check out those screws right there. It's pretty good. We got knurling. We got black oxide coating. We can see that the threads are relatively clean. We don't see any gunk towards the front of them. We see that the coating is stripping a little bit, but that's fairly standard of these type of black screws. They're non-PVD black screws. They're zinc black screws. They work great. They're fantastic screws. They're magnetic, as you can tell. I can grab it and steal one away. Not bad. And by that I mean ferrous, not magnetic. All right. Let's open this up. There we go. Simple top-bottom assembly. Looking at the top here, we can see a total of 6 big alignment tabs, very large alignment tabs, and we can see that essentially the entire area of the top is solid with the exception of the plate area. This helps with the sound quite a lot. Sounds pretty good. You'll see that for yourself, but essentially it minimizes the amount of internal cavity space as we discussed earlier. So let's take a look at the bottom. Oh, here we are. First thing we see is we've got our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 internal alignment tabs, but we also see a little bit of curvature here. And what's that? What's this curvature? What's going on here? This is actually really interesting. So there's tiny little curve above the USB cutout. It's very subtle, very cute, you know. You find curves in this thing where you least expect. Besides that, very, very simple bottom. Again, we see that this bit here and this bit here are solid, so the internal cavity that is open is just where the plate and PCB assembly would sit, which is fantastic, at least for the sound profile that this board has gone for. Logically looking at this, not having heard it, I would assume that this would sound incredibly dense, as in like the opposite of hollow, like kind of like a 75%. But it turns out that this actually sounds pretty good. Sounds nice and boomy, sounds proper. And I think having a large weight of this size, probably in this placement, has helped out quite a lot. So yeah, it's the internal weight is held on by 5 very small screws. They look like M1.5 screws. I'm not going to touch them because they are tiny, but they're hex screws. There's no Phillips head nonsense going on here. Attention to detail is pretty good. The steel looks decently sandblasted, very smoothly sandblasted, similar to the anodization of the keyboard. I didn't discuss it, but the anodization is very, very smooth. It's probably hit with 160 or 180 grit for the sandblast. If you don't know what that means, just you know what rough anodization feels like. This feels like very smooth anodization to the point where it basically feels like E-coat. But yeah, Very nice, very simple, and there's not much else going on. That's not a bad thing. Simple is good, especially, especially considering like a lot of people will try and make a pretty board by making it incredibly complex. This is kind of going the other way with it, which is, hey, let's make a pretty board, but just keep it super simple. So I'm going to undo the assembly. There's not going to be much to show under here. It is a simple top mount. The mount location points are relatively good. These are simple M2 screws. That means they would be interchangeable with stabilizer screws if you did lose your screws. But yeah, very simple. We can see that the mounting locations are U mounts, not O mounts. That traditionally allows you to get a little bit of flex, like the tiniest bit of flex out of the plate. In this case, not really, because the whole thing is relatively stiff. When I originally typed on this, I assumed that this plate was a 7 series plate, or potentially a steel plate, because it felt really, really stiff. But I think that's more due to the mounting than anything else, because this is a 5052 series aluminum plate, which is pretty much the standard for a softish aluminum plate. All right, here we are. We simply have the mounting points. We see our blockers. There's no engravings. There's nothing. It's clean. It's simple. It's doing its job just the way it should. Alrighty. And here we've got the PCB. Now, the plate, I mean, I'll save you the hassle. There's no meme cuts. There's no acoustic cuts. I think there might be one here, if I'm not mistaken. Where's switch puller? If there is not one here, then they are nowhere. Yep, there are no acoustic cuts anywhere. Doesn't need it. It sounds great the way that it is. One thing that I do want to note about the plate before we talk about the PCB is it's using kind of like an OTD style, Korean style cut for the spacebar switch. So the spacebar switch is only covered by the plate from the top, left and right, not from the bottom. From the bottom, you can just touch it. This is also to give a little bit of flex traditionally. Also, it's done for a little bit of an acoustic reason, but generally, if you're going for flex, then your spacebar stabilizer will be south-facing, so the wire will be down here instead of up here. Kind of gets like teeniest bit of flex. But in this case, there's no flex anywhere. This is a nice, stiff typing experience. Very consistent sounding, very consistent feeling, which is kind of what you want. For a board like this that's going like all out on the aesthetics, you want it to, be super freaky on the outside, but like super mellow, chill, on point, consistent on the inside. All right. So this does use an ARM controller, I think. There's a little... Wait, give me a second. I'll show you guys the controller. I had the controller reference written down, but I couldn't identify what the hell it was. There's our controller. Apparently it's a Raspberry Pi. It's an ARM controller. Now, I've had my issues with ARM controllers. I've complained about them in the past. I noted that on some ARM controllers, there is a large delay between plugging in the USB and actually being able to type. That is true. This controller, however, isn't super delayed. So you plug it in, you can use it pretty much instantly. Generally, you can identify an ARM controller without needing to look at the controller by just seeing that there are essentially 2 reset buttons on it. There's a reset and there's a USB boot. I've said a lot of bad things about ARM controllers, but one of the nice things about ARM controllers is in terms of flashing it. If I wanted to flash this, for example, I wouldn't have to take it apart. I would just boot it up while holding escape or control or whatever the default key is. And it would open up on my computer as a USB mass storage device. And I can literally just drag in the hex and it will just be done, which is very cool. Now, this came flashed, if I remember correctly, with VIA L. I prefer VIA L over VIA. I know a lot of people disagree. I don't like having to go online. I know that, recently commits have been getting approved a lot faster, but like having to rely on a third party versus just putting everything in here is great. Also, VIA L gives you tap dance, VIA doesn't have tap dance, and from my experience, VIA's limitation on how many macros and how long your macros can be are not as great as VIA L. VIA L gives you a little bit more. So yeah, we can see that the PCB supports 7U as well as 6.25U bottom row. I have no idea why this is. I would not be putting a 6.25 on something like this. The whole point is it's very simple. It's classy, Sangan bottom row, wing keyless blockers, nice and clean, nice and simple. I had no issues with the PCB. It's not super flashy, it's just standard green. And that's totally fine. Like, for what it is, I'm cool with this. This is all about, again, being flashy on the outside and being very subtle on the inside. And it accomplishes that quite well. So yeah, I mean, that's basically the tour of the board. There isn't too much going on realistically. I'll give you like my my typing feel impressions and my build recommendations, but then again, there's only 20 units of this, so like if you're into this, you're into this, and if you're not into this, you're not into this. Again, I don't really like I don't really like a more stiff typing experience, but this is stiff, not in a fatiguing way, but it is relatively stiff. It's stiffer than a lot of aluminum top mounts I've tried in the past. I don't know why. It just is. But I went with Gat X. My Gat X are completely unlubed. I kind of like that. Potentially, I would go with any sort of linear, but with a very light oil-based lube, not a grease-based lube. So not a 2 series, not 205, 203, 204, or grade 0, all that out the window. I'd go with like 103, 107 mix, or maybe a 104 or a nice 106. Basically lube them up with oil so you still have that crispiness of the bottom out without kind of mushing it up a little bit too much by introducing drag by using a grease. So like if I were going to keep this and I were going to rebuild this, I would keep the Gat X. I would probably spring swap them to maybe like 55, 58 grams personally. That's completely preference. And then lube the Gat X maybe with some 104, you know, some nice consistent lube coat, like very minimally, as to allow it to still feel snappy essentially, because that snappiness kind of like really ties it together. Like this is a board that you can type fast on for sure. I am a terrible typist, but like I can infer that. So yeah, I would absolutely stay with ABS on this versus PBT from a sound profile. We'll do the typing test like right after this, and you guys will hear it. It sounds great. I've already shot the typing test, by the way. That's how I know. And I did my usual thing. I mean, my sound testing environment is a matched pair of instrument mics, Rode NT5s. Those go into my audio interface with no processing, no limiters, no compressors, and it goes straight into the computer as is. So there's a lot of background noise because in reality, when you're really sitting at a table typing on a board, you can hear everything. But I've listened to it and basically made sure that it matches up with the actual sound of the board in real life. And I really do like the sound. It sounds hefty in the best way possible. So yeah, something like this, you could absolutely go with MX Blacks. Again, I would still lube them with oil over a grease, and I would personally still keep the weight a little bit low, a little bit under 60. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Normally, I'd go more in depth on build recommendations, but again, there's 20 units. They're probably all accounted for. So if you like this board, you're going to go buy it. If you don't like this board, you're not going to go buy it. And that's pretty much it. We'll go straight into the typing test, and then I'll give you my summary. Hello, everybody that skipped forward in the video. Go back and watch the actual video, because the summary is just going to be a summary. So, TLDR, Treeleaf 64, a hell of a character. You may agree or disagree on if it's a good or bad character, but this board is pretty nice. It's pricey, but given the MOQ, given the quality control, given the finishing, given the sound and feel, I think that's a perfectly fair price to ask for. It's got a lot of fun stuff going on. It's got a lot of curves, and you'll either love the design or you'll hate the design. I'm kind of indifferent to the design. Like, I like it to look at it, but to type on it, I don't know. Like, if I type on it with my eyes closed, I kind of like it. But then when I see what I'm typing on, I'm just like, oof, that is bezelly. And of course, it's all preference. Anyway, it's stiff feeling, but it's good stiff feeling. I do like it. I do recommend it, but I don't have to recommend it to you. I've said multiple times through the review, if this is a board that you like, you're going to go for it. And if this is a board you don't like, you're not going to go for it. There's not much interpretation there. So yeah, this has been a relatively short review by Simon standards. I hope you enjoy it. If you want to support this channel, by the way, there's a Patreon for $2.50 a month. You can support my YouTube video series, because my YouTube videos are notoriously expensive to produce and I don't make any money. I just consistently lose money. So if you like what you see, you can do that. If you don't have the financial means, then it's fine. Just give me a thumb, maybe drop a sub, maybe come hang out with us in the Discord, talk about stuff, maybe get some help, maybe get some advice, maybe teach some people. So yeah, that is my review of the Treeleaf 69917. And I'll see you guys in the next one. It's got a 9.17 degree typing angle, sticking to the theme, and the mosque just started. Thanks, prayers. My initial